Hi, I'm Tina, and this is the Sisterhood Sleuths Podcast, created by Kathy Warshaw of Secret Societies and the Sisterhood Sleuths, where we don't just accept what we're told, we question it, because secrets are everywhere, and curiosity is the key. So let me ask you something. Have you ever felt like someone was influencing you without you fully realizing it? Not forcing you, not telling you what to do, just guiding you, shifting your thinking, changing how you see someone. And only later, you realized something wasn't right. That feeling? That's where manipulation begins. Not loud, not obvious, subtle. And that's what makes it powerful. Let's slow this down. Most people think manipulation is easy to spot. They imagine someone controlling, pressuring, forcing. But real manipulation? It doesn't look like that. It feels natural. It feels like your own decision. And that's the danger. Because when something feels like your idea, you don't question it. Now think about that. If someone tells you what to do, you resist. But if someone leads you to believe it was your idea, you accept it. That's manipulation. Not control from the outside. Influence from within. Now imagine Chloe in that situation. She doesn't just listen to what's being said, she watches how it's being said. Because manipulation is not just in words, it's in tone, timing, framing, the way information is presented. Now let's go deeper. Why do people manipulate? Most people would say to control others. And sometimes that's true, but not always. Because manipulation often comes from something deeper. Fear, insecurity, desire for control, or even habit. Some people manipulate without even realizing they're doing it, because it's how they've learned to interact. Now, Lily would notice something important. Manipulation often feels slightly off, not wrong enough to call out, but not fully right either. A feeling that something is being shaped, directed. That's the signal. Now let's go deeper again. Manipulation works through influence, not force. It changes how you see something, without you realizing it. Let's make this real. Someone says most people would agree with this. What happens? You feel pressure. Not direct pressure, subtle. Because now, you don't want to be the one who disagrees. That's influence. Now imagine someone says, you're the kind of person who understands this. Now what happens? You want to live up to that. You want to agree, because it aligns with how you see yourself. That's manipulation. Not obvious, but effective. Now, Gil would notice this immediately, because he doesn't just listen to what's being said, he asks, what is this trying to make me believe? That question changes everything, because now you're not just receiving information, you're analyzing it. Now let's go deeper. Manipulation often works through emotion, not logic, because emotion moves faster. It makes you feel something. You react before you think. Now imagine this. Someone says something that creates that urgency. We need to decide right now. What happens? You feel pressure. You don't take time to think. You react. That's manipulation. Creating urgency to bypass thinking. Now let's go deeper again. Another form of manipulation is withholding information. Not lying, leaving things out. Because what you don't know affects how you decide. Now imagine someone gives you part of the story. Just enough, but not everything. Your decision is now based on incomplete information. And that is control. Now Yuki would approach this differently. She would treat information like a system. If something is missing, the system is incomplete. And incomplete systems lead to incorrect conclusions. That's where she focuses, not just on what's given, on what's not. Now let's go deeper. Manipulation also works through repetition, saying something again and again until it feels true, even if it's not. Because familiarity creates acceptance. The more you hear something, the more normal it feels. And what feels normal feels true. Now, May would notice this immediately because repetition without evidence is a signal. Not proof, but influence. Now, Aoife would expand this. She would look at patterns over time, not just one interaction, many. Does this person consistently guide conversations in a certain direction? Do they repeat certain ideas? Do they shape outcomes subtly? Because manipulation is rarely one moment. It's a pattern. And patterns tell the truth. Now let's bring this back to you. You've experienced this before. Moments where something felt off, where you agreed, but later questioned why. Where you felt influenced, but couldn't explain how. And now, you're starting to understand it. Not everything is direct. Not everything is obvious. And that's where awareness begins. Because once you recognize manipulation, you stop being controlled by it. You start seeing it, understanding it. And that changes everything. Because now, you're not just reacting, you're aware. Because once you understand that manipulation exists, the next step is recognizing it while it's happening. Not after, in the moment. Because that's where your power is. Let's break this down. There are specific tactics people use to manipulate. Not random, patterns. And once you see the patterns, you can't unsee them. The first tactic is framing. This is one of the most powerful because it doesn't change the facts. It changes how the facts are presented. Now imagine this. Two people describe the same situation. One says, this is a problem. The other says, this is an opportunity. Same situation, different frame. And that frame changes how you react. That's manipulation. Not lying, shaping perception. Now, Chloe would notice this immediately because she doesn't just listen to words. She asks, how is this being presented? And more importantly, what perspective is this trying to create? That's where the truth is. Now let's go to the second tactic. Selective information. We touched on this before, but now we go deeper. This is when someone gives you information, but not all of it. Just enough to guide your thinking. Now imagine making a decision based on incomplete information. You think you understand, but you don't have the full picture. And that affects your choice. That's manipulation. Now Yuki would catch this immediately because she doesn't assume the system is complete. She asks, what's missing? Because missing information is just as important as what's given. Now let's go deeper. The third tactic is emotional pressure. Not obvious pressure, subtle, guilt, urgency, approval. Now imagine this. Someone says, I thought you would understand. What happens? You feel pressure, not to think, to agree. Because now it's about how you're perceived, not the actual situation. That's manipulation, shifting the focus from the truth to emotion. Now, Gil would recognize this instantly because he separates emotion from information. He doesn't ignore emotion, but he doesn't let it control the decision. That's the difference. Now let's go deeper again. The fourth tactic is repetition, saying something again and again until it feels true, even if it's not. Now let's imagine hearing something multiple times. At first, you question it. Then, it starts to feel familiar, and eventually, it feels normal. That's how influence works, not through one statement, through repetition. Now, May would notice this immediately because repetition without evidence is a signal. Not proof, but influence. Now let's go to the fifth tactic, creating doubt. This one is subtle and powerful. Someone doesn't tell you what to think. They make you question yourself. Now imagine this. You notice something, you feel something, and someone says, "Are you sure about that?" Not aggressively, casually. What happens? You hesitate. You question yourself. And in that hesitation, you lose clarity. That's manipulation. Not controlling your thoughts directly, weakening your trust in them. Now, Lily would recognize this immediately because she tracks her own awareness. If something felt clear before and suddenly feels uncertain, she asks, what changed? Not in the situation, in the influence. That's the key. Now let's go deeper again. The sixth tactic is false alignment. This is when someone makes it seem like they agree with you to guide you somewhere else. Now imagine this. Someone says, I completely agree with you, and then slowly shifts the conversation, leading you to a different conclusion that feels like your own. That's manipulation, because it builds trust first, then redirects. Now, Luca would test this immediately. He wouldn't accept alignment at face value. He would watch what happens next. Does it stay aligned, or does it shift? Because real alignment holds. False alignment redirects. Now let's bring in something deeper. Manipulation often combines multiple tactics, not just one. Framing, selective information, emotional pressure, repetition, doubt, false alignment, all working together. And that's why it's hard to see, because it doesn't look like manipulation. It feels like a normal interaction. Now, Aoife would see the full pattern, not just one tactic, all of them over time. Because manipulation is not a moment, it's a pattern. And patterns reveal intention. Now let's bring this back to you. You're starting to see it, not just in obvious situations, in everyday conversations, subtle shifts, small influences, moments that guide your thinking. And now, you're not just reacting, you're aware. That's the shift, from being influenced to understanding influence. And once you understand it, you're no longer controlled by it. But there's one more step, and it's the most important one. What do you do with that awareness? Because recognizing manipulation is one thing. Responding to it is something else entirely. In the next part, we bring everything together. What it looks like when you see manipulation clearly, and how to handle it without losing control. Because awareness is only the beginning. Now you see it. Not perfectly, not all at once, but enough. Enough to recognize when something is being shaped. Enough to notice when your thinking is being guided. And now comes the most important part. What do you do with that awareness? Because recognizing manipulation and handling it are two very different things. Let's go back to that moment. You feel it. A shift, a subtle pressure, a conversation moving in a direction that doesn't fully feel like your own. Before, you might have followed it. Now, you pause. Not visibly, internally, because that pause gives you control. Most people don't pause. They react. They respond immediately. And in that reaction, they lose awareness. That's where manipulation works best, in speed. So what do you do instead? You slow it down. Not the conversation, your response. That's the first step. Now let's step into this like a real sleuth. Chloe doesn't push back immediately. She doesn't argue, she observes. Because reacting emotionally gives control away. Staying calm keeps control with you. That's the difference. Now Lily would take this further. She would ask a question, not to challenge, to clarify. Because questions shift the dynamic. They move you from receiving to understanding. Now imagine this. Someone is guiding you toward a conclusion. Instead of agreeing, you ask, what makes you see it that way? That question changes everything. Because now they have to explain. And in explaining, they reveal more. That's control. Now Gil approaches this strategically. He doesn't resist directly. He redirects. If someone is trying to guide the conversation, he shifts it. Not aggressively, subtly. Because control is not about stopping the other person. It's about maintaining your position. Now let's go deeper, because here's what most people don't realize. You don't have to fight manipulation to overcome it. You just have to not follow it. Think about that. If someone is trying to lead you somewhere and you don't go, they lose control. Not because you stopped them, because you didn't engage in the direction. That's power. Now let's bring in Yuki. Yuki doesn't get pulled into influence. She evaluates it. If something doesn't align, she doesn't accept it. She doesn't reject it emotionally either. She simply doesn't incorporate it. That's control. Now May would go deeper. She would ask, what is the intention behind this? Because once you understand intention, you understand everything. Not just what's being said, why it's being said. And when you understand that, you're no longer reacting. You're aware. Now Aoife would step back. She would look at the full pattern, not just one interaction, many. Because manipulation is rarely isolated. It repeats, it builds. And when you see that pattern, you don't need confirmation. You understand. Now let's bring this back to you. You're in that moment. You feel the shift. Instead of reacting, you pause, you observe, you ask, and then you decide. Not based on pressure, not based on influence, based on clarity. That's the shift. From being guided to choosing your direction. Now here's the truth. You won't always avoid manipulation completely. No one does. But you'll recognize it faster, you'll respond differently, you'll stay in control. And that changes everything. Because once you understand how influence works, you're no longer easily influenced. You're aware. And awareness is power. Not loud power, quiet control. The kind that allows you to move through situations without being pulled in directions you didn't choose. Now think about that. How different would your decisions be if you recognized influence in real time? If you stayed clear instead of reacting? If you chose your direction instead of following someone else's? That's what you're building. Not resistance, clarity. And clarity is what keeps you in control. So the next time you feel that shift, don't rush, don't react. Pause, observe, and choose your response. Because the moment you choose, you take back control. This week, your mission is called Pause Before You Follow. At some point this week, notice a moment when someone tries to influence your thinking, emotions, or decisions. It could happen in a conversation, on social media, in advertising, at school, with friends, even in entertainment. When you feel pressure to immediately agree, react, decide, or follow, pause. Then ask yourself, what emotion is this creating in me? Is this trying to make me think clearly or react quickly? Am I being given the full picture? What might be missing? Is this guiding me toward a conclusion? Your mission is not to become suspicious of everyone. Your mission is to become aware of influence. Write down one moment where you noticed pressure or influence, which tactic you think was being used. Framing, repetition, emotional pressure, selective information, doubt, and how pausing changed the way you responded. Because real sleuths understand something important. The moment you pause and think for yourself, you take back control. And people who can think clearly under pressure become very hard to manipulate. This is the Sisterhood Sleuths Podcast, where awareness becomes your advantage and clarity becomes your strength. And in the next episode, we go even deeper. People who can think clearly under pressure become very hard to manipulate. Until then, this is the Sisterhood Sleuth Podcast, and I'm Tina, reminding you to stay curious, stay aware, and remember, secrets are everywhere. Curiosity is the key.
This episode was brought to you by Secret Societies and the Sisterhood Sleuths, an award-winning mystery adventure franchise featuring books, podcasts, music, educational programs, puzzles, and a global community for curious minds. Join the conversation with fellow sleuths right now in our official Goodreads Mystery Club. Learn more at sisterhoodsleuths.net.